Fred. Hello, hello. Reverend Walker is going to be talking to us about transparency and democracy, along with Aaron Leahy, you see there from Act on Mass. Who else is coming into the room as we're getting going? Keep dropping those names in the chat, everybody. We want to see who's with us, so thanks for coming on. Yes, thanks again, Judy from Fall River. We have Sean, who's a hub coordinator for Sunrise Boston, so we're eager to hear from him on the efforts happening locally. And State Rep Erica Eiderhoven, who is righteously representing Somerville on behalf of the people who enthusiastically elected her. So we're really excited about our panelists tonight. We are going to get started in just about 30 seconds because we have a very full program. So welcome Bill from Cape Cod, Sharon from New Salem. Thanks so much, Dylan from Barr. Oh, it's so great to see everyone from all across the state. Linda from Springfield, thanks for logging on, signing in. I'm Miss Karen from Shelburne Falls, Travis from Medford, and Ferd Walken from Franklin County. Thanks again so much. We're going to get started. Tom from Mendon, Michael from Southborough. We're going to hop in to our invocation in just a moment. Hilda from Cape Cod, John from Reading. Oh, this is wonderful. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Llewellyn from Scituate. Anyone else? Who am I missing? Kevin from Fall River. Shout out to Fall River. All right, so let's see. I think we've got Nancy from East Hampton, of course, one of our panelists. And Nancy, I forgot to mention that she's not on the slide, but she will be speaking with you this evening. So excited to hear from Nancy. Okay, so without further ado, because we want to keep our panel rolling and getting our meeting going on time, I'm going to pass it over to Henry for our invocation. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. We recognize that tonight we meet on lands taken from indigenous peoples. We recognize that we live within the American capitalist system founded on slavery, a system that established a legacy of violence, racism, and selfish acquisition that includes mass shootings, racism, sexism, homophobia, and economic inequality. A system that creates vaccine inequality, maldistribution of health, housing, education, and income. We join together to turn this country around. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. May it be so. So our agenda this evening is going to be fast, and we've got a lot of information to cover. So in addition to the national update from Hal Ginsberg coming to us from OR National, we also have, as I'd mentioned, Aaron Leahy from Act on Mass and Erica Eiderhoven that's coming to us from 27th state representative to talk about transparency, democracy, and our Mass state legislature. And then the second part of our program will focus on the state Democratic Party, where we'll be hearing from Sean Donaghy, Nancy Stenberg, and Reverend Vernon Walker. So without further ado, I would like to transition over. Sorry, folks, make sure I'm not missing anybody. Oh yeah, go ahead, Al, take it.
All right, thank you so much. Great to talk to you, Amanda, and see Henry again, and all my friends in Massachusetts. I'll be brief. We want to get to the 4 tremendous speakers that we have on this call. And I always like being on these calls because I learn so much. And one of my really important moments for me in my life was when I got to announce Our Revolution's endorsement of Senator Ed Markey. And that really meant a lot to me. And I was so delighted that Massachusetts re-elected Senator Markey. So before I get into the specifics of the event and the national report, we do want to ask you if you can become an Our Revolution movement builder. We really do appreciate the support. And I'm going to you may hear me typing real quick. Just type this in real quick, rrev.us/MA for Massachusetts, MEM. So if you can join, and let me make sure I get that to everyone. If you can join as a movement builder, we'd really appreciate it. It helps us continue all our organizing, whether it was in Massachusetts for U.S. Senator Markey, for Congresswoman Presley, and all the other great progressives in this state, helping to turn the Senate blue in January. Right now, we're fighting for Senator Nina Turner in Ohio, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later in the program. So again, if you can become a movement builder, we greatly appreciate that. OurRev.us, MAM, Massachusetts member. So let me move on. So we are fighting for progressive policies, and there was us in the mall. I actually was leading that event. So exciting as well for Medicare for All. You can see Congresswoman Dingell in the middle left slide. To her right, to my right, is Colin Byrd, Mayor Byrd, so a rising star in Maryland. He is Maryland mayors, or mayors, not Maryland mayors, mayors for Medicare for All. So this is one of our top fights, and we welcome the support of Our Revolution Massachusetts in that fight for Medicare for All. We've got to get the Democratic Congress members all behind this legislation. And there she is, Congresswoman Dingell, co-lead sponsor, along with my friend Phil Ateto. He is a cancer survivor who is spending far too much time and energy fighting with his insurance provider rather than fighting the cancer. So we move on to New Jersey, where my and I don't know whether I'm an organizer or coordinator. Now I'm apparently the East Region Director, so I've been promoted. There's Anna Marta. She is also a regional director, and she confronted a very powerful Congress member, Frank Pallone. He is chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. He has come out in favor of Medicare for All. So when we organize, we really do win. The Senate Resolution 1 for the People Act to really bring back democracy. I know Henry and I have discussed this. He's very excited about our organizing, the money we're spending in West Virginia, the Mountain State, and Arizona, the Grand Canyon State. You might not think those are the most likely candidates for Our Revolution seed money. Arizona, of course, turning from red to purple these days. West Virginia, though, there is a strong populist tinge in that state, and we are working hard to have the Democratic Party support workers, to support minors, so that it can again command support from West Virginia. So again, For the People Act. And there's, of course, our hero, Bernie. We do demand that highly profitable corporations, indeed the most powerful and most profitable in the world, Amazon, pay its fair share. We're only going to get the legislation, though, that we demand if we end the filibuster. We thought it might be dead. The White House has said they're not really going to support it, but we have been pushing and pushing and pushing. We hope to get that filibuster reform so we can promote progressive legislation. And I mentioned Amazon a moment ago. We are fighting to pass the PRO Act to make it easier, not necessarily easy, but easier for workers to organize, because when they organize, they win. It is, in the end, all about workers, poor, struggling, and working class Americans, and we are fighting to organize Amazon in Alabama. And that is a nice little collage there of the Amazon workers that we have been standing shoulder to shoulder with in the fight for worker justice, for economic justice, and for racial justice, and for sex and gender justice, because the working class in America, and especially workers who we, I think, would all agree are underpaid, overworked, and often tragically exploited, are disproportionately women and people of color. And I believe that is going to get us to just about the end of my segment. So yeah, we're fighting Joe Biden on this issue. We want no federal contracts for union busters. We are endorsing candidates. Karen Carter-Peterson is in a runoff now. We supported her in Louisiana. She has come out in favor of Medicare for All. We're fighting to transform the party. Again, one more time, if you can become a union builder, movement builder, and help us build unions, OurRev.us, MOM. And I don't think I went overtime. Let me turn it over to you, Amanda, for our first guest, Aaron Leahy.
Thanks so much, Hal. And yes, $5 goes a long way. So I just made sure my stuff was updated. So as we go from Hal's national update, thank you very much for that, Hal, to Erin from Act on Mass. Erin is a field organizer with the Bernie Sanders campaign in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Wisconsin in 2020. She then served as a field director for Anna Callahan in her run for state rep. And since October 2020, Erin has been the campaign manager for Act on Mass. So welcome to Erin. She is perfectly positioned to tell us all about the lack of transparency in the state legislature. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you to Our Revolution Massachusetts for having me. A little fun fact is my very first foray into political activism was with OR Cambridge back in 2016. So it is because of you all, really, that I'm here right now. So thank you so much for having me. Go ahead and kick us off, Hal. Awesome. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about the issue of transparency in the Mass State House, or really rather, the lack thereof. It might sound like a kind of wonky technical issue, but whether or not everyday people are able to engage with lawmaking has a really real impact on the State House's ability to pass progressive legislation. When lawmaking happens almost entirely behind closed doors, people lose their power and can't make their voices heard. So when the interests of everyday people are not being heard, whose interests are getting behind the door, right? It's always corporate interests and the interests of the super wealthy. And here are just a couple of examples of ways in which our reps aren't truly representing us. So same-day voter registration, a really perfect example of bipartisan bill, super popular, super common. I think we're the only state in New England that doesn't have it. And what happened in the Mass legislature? Well, it passed the Senate, which is great. Oh, sorry, Hal. It passed the Senate over a decade ago with bipartisan support, but has been killed in the House in all of the last 7 sessions, single payer. Believe it or not, the first single payer bill in Mass was introduced in 1986. And despite widespread support in Massachusetts, demonstrated again and again, single payer bills have been sent to city for years. Next one, Hal. Immigrant Protections. So there's a bill in the House called the Safe Communities Act that ensures basic protections for immigrants, documented and undocumented. And here again, passed the Senate. And in the House, this bill and its equivalents have been killed in committee for 8 years running. And my last little example here, if you don't mind, the next one. The Healthy Youth Act would mandate that sex ed teach about healthy relationships and consent and be LGBTQ plus affirming. And it's the same story here, folks. So widely popular bill passed the Senate and killed in the House again and again and again. And you might be noticing a pattern at this point. Another thing that connects all of these different policies together and many others is that they're actually part of the state Democratic Party platform. So in other words, these are all policies that are explicitly supported by the Democratic Party here in Massachusetts. And the State House has a super majority of Democrats. So that means the 30 Republicans can't stop them from passing bills, and neither can our Republican governor. So why, if you wouldn't mind passing to the next slide, here's the big question. So why does the supermajority of Democrats in the House lack the political will to implement its own stated agenda? Next slide. It is a question so common, it's even been made into memes. This one I particularly like. And it has a complicated answer, and you might not be so surprised to learn a big part of what's going on is the systemic lack of transparency. Next slide, please. So the truth is, there are constant conversations taking place in the State House about what laws should and should not be passed, and we are just not invited to those conversations. And the State House rules, as they're currently written, are really effective at shutting out the public, but letting lobbyists and corporate interests to walk right in. Next slide. So first, this is kind of the big one, or one of the really big issues. We, generally speaking, don't get to see how our reps vote, which is theoretically supposed to be votes on our behalf. Next one. So first, a bill goes to committee right after it's filed. And often that's where it dies, either by being voted down or by being sent to study, which is just a kind of cute way of saying it's not going anywhere. Usually studies never even occur. And if you're following a bill you're passionate about and you want to see which reps voted it down in committee, you are probably out of luck. Mass is actually in the minority of states that doesn't publicize all their committee votes, and even the Senate, the more progressive of the two bodies, has publicized their committee votes for years. Next slide. And then even if a bill does make it out of committee, which is really, really rare, right? 6,000 bills get filed at the beginning of the session, and it goes to a floor vote, most of those votes don't end up being public either. Most are voice votes, which is what it is by default, right? So a call of the yeas and nays. And that means there's no vote of how any rep voted, or no record of how they voted, rather. And generally, those types of votes are theater. If it's a voice vote, it's really leadership deciding whether it passes or fails. And this is a really big problem, right? So the theory of representative democracy is that we elect people to represent us. And if throughout their term we see they're taking votes that don't align with our views, then we can decide whether or not to support somebody else in the next election. But that system breaks down if we can't actually see what votes they're casting. Next slide. Oh, and another harsh truth is that often reps don't even know what they're voting on when they do take votes. In the current rules, reps are only allotted a minimum of 24 hours to read a bill before voting on it. And often in reality, it's even less than that. Some bills are hundreds of pages long, and the reps don't have time to read it before they take a vote on it, and they really don't have time to think about what should be amended, if anything, and draft and file that amendment. And not only is it bad for reps, it's bad for us as activists and advocates, because how are we supposed to mobilize either for or against a particular bill or amendment if we have less than a day to do it? And when bills are rushed out of committee onto a floor with almost no notice, that's a deliberate thing. That is a tactic, right? They want to ram it through with as little discussion or notice as possible. And that's the behavior of people who are trying to hide something. Next slide, Hal. And in addition to votes, there are other types of information our legislators generally don't want us to see, or don't think we have the right to see even. And other than live testimony at a hearing, the testimony presented to committees in favor or against a bill are generally not available to the public. Either a bill dies or passes because somebody wanted it to, right? And we don't get to know who that person was or who those organizations were or what they said. And the next one is kind of a doozy. Mass is actually, oh, so sorry, Hal, back there. Mass is the only state where all three branches of government have exempted themselves from public records law. That means, oh my God, sorry, Hal. That means records that would be considered public in most other states, such as meeting agendas, emails, expense reports, are not public to big staters. Hal, I had too many slides and too many animations, and that's on me.
Just say next slide loudly, and
I will.
Be really good.
You're doing great. Next slide. The other big barrier to everyday people accessing and engaging with the legislature is actually the website. For instance, bills and amendments are not shown in the context of what they're amending. So in order to understand the effect of a bill, you literally have to find and leaf through the bill or Massachusetts law that it's referencing to understand what it does. Next slide. Plus, following a bill through the State House is a total nightmare. You can ask any advocate who's tried to do that. It's awful. Every time a bill is acted on, it gets a new number, and every number gets its own webpage with its own history. And I just have here one example of a bill's journey through the Senate. It ends up in multiple committees combined with other bills. It receives 5 different numbers over the course of its journey. But wait, there's more. It then has to do all of that in the House as well. Next slide. And then when it doesn't pass that session, which is almost always the case, it has to be filed again and do the whole dance again next session. Imagining following that session to session to session. Pretty awful. Next slide. This is just to stress everybody out. This is, I have nothing else to say about this. It stresses me out. Next slide. So my analysis here and the analysis of Act en Masse is when everyday people are effectively shut out of the legislative process, don't even get to see the way the reps vote, there can't be any accountability. You can have a secretive government or a democracy, but you can't have both. Next slide. Here we go. The good news is that there is a robust movement to change all of that, and we've been gaining a lot of momentum. Last month, during the joint rules debate, in coordination with Act en Masse, Rep. Eiderhoven, who you might be hearing from later, filed an amendment to the House's joint rules proposal. And this amendment would ensure that the proposal included making all committee votes and testimony public. This was Amendment 8. Next slide. Despite over 1,000 calls and emails and tweets from constituents in support of Amendment 8, ultimately only 8 Democrats voted in favor. And this was incredibly disappointing. Next slide. So, another big question, why did so many Democrats, including reps who have a history of supporting public committee votes and testimony, vote against Amendment 8? Well, that segues nicely into our next topic. Concentration of power. So let's talk about it. It's a really big problem in the State House. And in order to understand why our reps do what they do, you gotta understand the toxic culture inside the building they work in. Next slide. The Speaker of the House is not the only problem in the State House, but it's a big one. He holds incredible power. And I say he because there's never been a woman Speaker of the House in Massachusetts. Little fun fact. Basically, he decides what bills come to a vote, when they do, and frankly, whether or not they pass. The powers I listed here are really just a small snapshot of the many levers of control he has in his hands. So what does this power look like in practice? Next slide. Every floor vote in the last decade, and maybe even more, has had the result the Speaker wanted it to. Not just final votes on bills, but amendments too. So you might think, what are the odds of that? Well, not bad, considering the fact that the vast majority of Democratic reps vote 90 to 100% the same as the Speaker does. So why do the reps follow the Speaker's lead so faithfully, even when it conflicts with the desires and interests of their constituents? The Speaker pressures rank and file reps to conform with a system of rewards and punishments. Next slide. Rewards. So remember on that other slide, the Speaker can appoint committee assignments, committee chairs, and leadership roles. Committee assignments are a big deal for reps. Some committees come with a lot of power, right? Think Ways and Means. Some see relatively little action and basically no bills. So a lot of reps will do whatever they can to stay on the Speaker's good side to get the good committee assignments. Plus, he gets to appoint chairs and leadership positions. Not only do these roles come with a lot of power, like a lot of power, they also come with some pretty handsome bonuses, right? The Speaker can more or less double your salary if he wants to. And there are so many chairs and vice chairs that over half of reps receive some kind of stipend at the direction of the Speaker. That means over half the membership has a financial interest and a career interest in being on the Speaker's good side. Next slide. And we've seen plenty of documented examples of what happens to reps when they get on the Speaker's bad side. These examples here, and many more like them, are a warning shot to the entire House. Disobey the Speaker at your own peril. You can't vote the same way as the Speaker and keep your committee assignment. We need to change the system and hold accountable those who uphold the status quo, both leadership and the rank and file reps who buy into this system. To be clear, there are a lot of issues that plague the State House, and some of them are purely cultural that are a little bit trickier, right? For example, reps take it personally when another rep asks for a roll call, right? So to record the votes on a certain bill or amendment. They don't like that. They call it spotting their colleagues, and it's discouraged. It's something that's stigmatized to do. Or reps will sometimes vote against good amendments that would benefit people's lives solely because the person who filed it, quote unquote, didn't talk to them first, or frankly, because they don't like the person who filed it. This is really common stuff in politics and especially in the state house. This culture and mindset really plagues the whole house. And when reps personalize things like that, it does a really big disservice to their constituents and activists who are trying to make a real change. Next slide. There are two ways to try to change that type of culture. One, elect reps who don't subscribe to it, which I highly recommend. But in the meantime, you can also pressure them to change the rules that govern their behavior. And that's what we're doing right now at Act en Masse. That brings us to the transparency campaign. There are dozens of rules reforms we can and should organize behind to change the state house. And here are just a few of them that I've listed. Next slide. And what would a presentation be without a call to action? So we launched our Transparency's Power campaign back in November and successfully mobilized thousands of constituents to lobby their reps to make the House more transparent. Together, we built enough power to scare the speaker into punting the rules to July, not to mention they conceded to us partial committee votes in the joint rules, which was entirely unprecedented in the results of our grassroots organizing. So this is definitely a step in the right direction towards a state house that is transparent, accessible, and accountable, but our work is far from done. We're going to be organizing up to the rules vote for the House in July to keep pushing for the state house we all deserve, and we need your help to do it. So join our fight, join the transparency campaign at actonmasse.org/the-campaign. That is my time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Erin, for putting that into a narrative that we can digest and get behind and get into action. Thanks to Bart for sharing about how Vermont defeated their dictatorship. Let's see if we can reform our own state house. Next up on the agenda is Erica Eiderhoven. She is elected by the people of Somerville, currently the state representative for Middlesex 27, and we're really excited to have her following up because she's going to talk about the next steps because she's at the state house in the middle of all this. Long before she represented the people of Somerville, Erica co-founded Act en Masse, and when elected in November, she made it clear that she's going to continue to fight for transparency, democracy, social justice, and all the issues that won her the enthusiastic endorsement of us here at WORMA and many other progressive organizations. So welcome again, Erica. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. So I just want to say how much it means to me to be here with you all today, just to share a little bit. You know, I and many of us here are in this rising movement today, come to politics and organizing, not because it's some career path or an appealing career path, but as children of the movement. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart. The movement is what raised me and made me who I am today and the leader that I am today in the State House. And really, we came to this, right, because it was a powerful way for us to reclaim our voice. And I'll just share really quickly, you know, I'd never thought I was going to be in politics before Bernie Sanders ran for office. So in 2016, when Bernie ran for president, you know, he broke the spell of neoliberalism, but beyond bringing the democratic socialist policies to the forefront of American political discourse, he did a lot more for us here, and myself included. I'll just speak for myself. Working on the 2016 campaign, he completely changed the orientation of how I view myself in the world, rather than living through life thinking that things are just going to happen to me and just hope for the best and try to control what you can. His campaign made it very clear that I had a responsibility to create the world that I believe in. And I think that's what brings all of us here today, is that we are here to fight for a Massachusetts that works for all of us. And that's something that, you know, I bring with me every day. And that's where, you know, from working on Bernie's campaign and to where I am now, I really couldn't stop fighting for all of the issues that bring us here. So I'll just share, you know, I mean, one of the things that I believe deep down is that the State House is the people's house. I believe every single one of us has a right to a dignified life. And that means everyone's basic human needs are met, including housing, healthcare, education, and a livable climate. And that every one of us has the voice and agency to shape our shared commonwealth. But let me be clear, that is not what's happening in the State House today. And so rather than serving as the people's house, the State House serves merely as a rubber stamp and mouthpiece for corporations. Here in Massachusetts, we live in a corporate town. And what that means is because it's fundamentally serving as corporate interests, that is the State House, it is both autocratic and white supremacist. And so you saw a lot of what Aaron shared on the autocratic side, right? These are, behind the veil of transparency, the curtain of transparency, that is how they get away with serving corporate interests without the scrutiny of the voters and residents of Massachusetts. Because we know that here in Massachusetts, all these policies are popular. They only can get away with it because they're able to operate behind closed doors. And that's why I'm so excited that we're here today to fight for transparency and the healthy democracy that we all deserve. And that's something that's really why I co-founded Act en Masse, was because transparency underlies every single issue. We are hamstrung if we do not fight to ensure that this is happening in the public eye. And I'll talk a little bit more about later on just specific issues where this comes up. But just to be really clear, right, there is an intentional and calculated attack by corporations emboldened by white supremacy to dismantle our public goods. And they largely do that. They do that through all, of course, levels of government. But I think one of the biggest levers they pull is the State House. And they are able to do that because the State House is completely shielded. And also the fact that, unlike the federal government, which is on TV all the time, and then you have local government where, people are quite close to their electeds, the State House is in this sort of in-between space, right? Where it feels far enough that we feel disempowered and we don't know how we can move the entire institution, and yet it has so little coverage and so little transparency. And that's how they're getting away with this. And I think nothing makes it more clear that the State House is serving corporate interests than the COVID-19 pandemic. It is just absolutely atrocious, the response that we've had as a state. I just want to share a few pieces of that, because literally every decision we've made has been centered on corporate interests. And we in the legislature, when it's our job to hold Governor Baker accountable, take it as it is that he is a Republican governor, we have done nothing to respond to him. And just to share a little bit, Massachusetts cumulative death has the 4th highest in the country. We are the 4th highest deaths in the country that has the worst outcomes for results of COVID-19. I think there's very few other countries that have, messed up this crisis more than the United States. And even if you take the past week, right, we are still ranking 10th highest in terms of deaths. And then when you look at the disparities of white communities versus BIPOC communities, this virus is ravaging BIPOC communities, and we have done so little to mitigate that. And so it likely, and to add to that, right, in that context, we are if Massachusetts was a country, we'd be the 4th richest country in the world. So we really are the epitome of sort of all the horrible things of a white supremacist capitalist society. We embody that here in Massachusetts, and yet we have this veneer of being progressive and, very blue, deeply democratic. And yet that's when you look beyond sort of that facade, it's so clear how much we are destroying and ravaging people's lives. And again, every decision we've made here at the state level in response to COVID has been driven by corporate interests. Who were brought back, right? Why are we moving to open the economy? They are all pushed by what corporate lobbyists have been fighting for, and ensuring that, we, at the expense of people's lives, that we reopen the economy, and we ensure, we just keep allowing this to happen. This, again, the legislature has done so little. And I think most recently, sort of what we've seen with the public schools reopening. I mean, the fact that, Governor Baker and Desi are forcing open, all schools to be 5 days a week, regardless of the situation. Again, that largely impacts BIPOC communities. And then saying that, if you don't fulfill our demands, this is the autocratic part. If you don't fulfill our demands, we're going to withhold state funding from your school districts, especially the districts that have been most impacted by this crisis. We are punishing them by taking away their funding. So that's just to give a little context on how dire the situation is. And to put it really simply, right, we deserve better. And it is our responsibility to build that state house that is the people's house. And what I see day in and day out in the state house is there is a constant over prioritizing careers and relationships and upward trajectory over the issues that we ran on, right? Rather than fighting for those issues, we're prioritizing relationships, prioritizing careers, and being in the room where it happens rather than, fighting for the issues that are happening. And that is how we end up with over and over again, as our governor is bungling this crisis, that we do nothing to stand up to them, right? All we do is write letters, we co-sponsor bills, and we say we're going to have conversations behind closed doors. But there's no way for you all to hold me accountable to ensuring that I'm actually fighting for your needs and fighting for your issues. And that's just not the world that we can live in. And that's something that I think is just so kind of fundamental. And that's something that Act en Masse, Our Revolution, and Sunrise, as well as a few other groups, are standing up and saying, no, we need to absolutely have accountability, right? Transparency, accountability, and accessibility of our state house. And I want to also just share, because I know that, we've seen this transparency campaign. Just to be very clear, right? This is something that the speaker and the House leadership refused to move on for years. And through this campaign, right, from mobilizing and organizing thousands of people and contacting 500,000 voters, they conceded. They had to put some of the committee votes, partial of it online. It's not enough. It's the right step in the right direction, but we have to do more. And this is an approach that we know works because you put pressure on the State House and make clear demands, hold our state reps accountable. Because again, I work for you all. Every one of our state reps works for you all. And that orientation of power, rather than coveting sort of that relationship and access to state reps, is what's really, I think, what's so fundamentally different from what Act en Masse, ORMA, and Sunrise Movement does. And so that's the one piece that I just want to leave you all with, that's what we really need to be ensuring to fight for. So I really encourage all of you to sign up for Act en Masse's campaign, as well as join forces. We have a massive coalition that is fighting for these changes that are foundational to ensuring that we're actually able to fight for the issues that affect our daily lives. And so I just want to thank you all so much for being here, for organizing, for fighting. And remember, this is something that the Boston Globe put out when they endorsed, these transparency campaigns, was that, these reps will vote against these issues at the peril of losing their seats at elections. So please remember that. That is something that every time we re-elect state reps who aren't representing you, that is us reinforcing the system, this autocratic white supremacist system that we cannot bear and continue to work with anymore. We absolutely need to change this. So again, thank you all so much for what you do for organizing, and I'm going to pass it back over to Amanda.
Thank you so much, Rep. Eiderhoven, for all that you're doing for your constituents in Somerville and for all of us. We really appreciate your good work. Please note in the chat that Aaron has dropped that link. So if you've heard all of this and you're like, this is ridiculous, I'm ready to act, go click that link. It's right there waiting for you. And so we're going to shift gears now that we have a full overview of what's happening at the State House right now and the issues that are facing us there. Let's shift over to the Democratic State Party. So first up on our agenda is Nancy Stenberg. She joins us from East Hampton. In addition to her work as an elementary school librarian in Springfield, she's a member of the Democratic State Committee and founding member of Our Revolution, Mass. She's also a part-time activist coordinator for the Mass Teachers Association, passionate about equity, education equity, economic justice, single payer, and the use of the Oxford comma, following rules of the road, and properly citing your sources. She comes to us very holistic, a whole person. Welcome to Nancy.
Thank you so much for having me. So while I am talking about what is basically the resolution of the Morse-Neal primary, known as the Jakes report, I also want you to know that I am going to be referring to a couple of other documents. Number one, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, is known as the final determination of certain complaints of named parties, which was issued by Chip Flowers, the Deputy Legal Counsel for the State Party. And I will also be referring to the minutes of the Rules Committee that met on January 7th, 2021, prior to our meeting of the full body on January 28th. So at the Rules Committee, meeting, the members put together the Jakes report and the final determination document. And the results of that are, first of all, let me back up. The final determinations document was the final result of the document that many of you signed, bringing complaints against Jim, Gus, and Veronica. There are two legal terms to be aware of when I'm talking about all of this stuff. The first one is frivolous, a legal term referring to a lawsuit clearly intended merely to harass, delay, or embarrass the opposition, and intent, mental desire and will to act in a particular way, including wishing not to participate. So number one, the DSA should determine conclusively whether the chair is considered staff. And we've highlighted here, such as collecting a salary, because that actually does come up. First of all, the committee, the Rules Committee concurred with the recommendations of the Jakes report that they should consider whether or not Gus Bickford is staff. However, they also determined that regardless of such determination, it appears that payment of salary and other benefits to the chairperson satisfied the separate conditions set forth in Section 2 of our charter that says no financial resources of the state committee shall be used in any contested Democratic primary. Next slide, please. Recommendation number 2, the DSA should clarify when an individual becomes a candidate for the purpose of DSC bylaws section 2D, which we reference a lot. So staff can clearly know the boundary of appropriate contact with individuals contemplating a Democratic primary. Then they said that they had made an action, but their actions really are no actions, and you'll begin to see a pattern here. First of all, the Rules Committee did vote unanimously to attach the following motion to the legal review of Section 8. And that it basically says that an individual is officially recognized as a primary election candidate on the day following the last day that the Secretary of the Commonwealth determines that a candidate may withdraw their name from the ballot. I got a little dizzy reading that one. So that is how they determined to deal with that one. The next two slides go together. The first one is the Jakes recommendation, and the second is the proposed action. Next slide, please. And then next slide, please. So the proposed action of the fact that we need to have a judicial council, which we've actually been talking about having for probably 5 years now. I discovered that this had been sent to the bylaws subcommittee 2 weeks ago. They decided there is a need for change, and they have charged a small group of bylaws and charter subcommittee members to determine if the DSC will keep and modify the current judicial council or come up with a completely new group. However, they were not given a deadline in order to get this done, as far as I am aware. Next slide, please. All right, recommendation number 4. DSC chair, staff, volunteers, office holders, and members should be trained about the role of the Judicial Council. And proposed action, when the recommendation of the bylaws subcommittee is passed down to the state committee membership, training will be developed. So I have not heard any update on this. It's clearly tied to number 3. So hopefully action will flow from there. Next slide, please. All righty, now we're on to number 5. DSC should adopt and publish a code of ethical conduct as stated in the DSC Charter, Article 8, Section 1. Proposed action, move that this be sent to the Personnel Subcommittee to create a code of ethical conduct. I really was a little puzzled about why this went to the Personnel Subcommittee, especially because Article 8, Section 1 states in part, the state committee shall adopt and publish a code of ethical conduct of party officials. And as you know, we were already having a bit of a controversy over who is staff, who is a member, and I can't even imagine throwing in what a party official means on top of that. Next slide, please. Number 6. DSC chair, staff, volunteers, DSC office holders, and DSC members should be trained on the Code of Ethical Conduct. Proposed action. After the August meeting, training will be developed. I don't know why we have to wait until August. Why are we waiting? Next slide, please. And then number 7, the DSC should take appropriate action regarding staff consistent with the findings of this review. Proposed action, this is my favorite. As you will hear during the Rules Committee report, actions have been taken. The action that was taken was no action. Veronica Martinez, currently the only person involved, considered staff, and it was determined that she had no primary intent to interfere in the primary. In summary, the Rules Committee decided to take no actions on any of the complaints sent to them by you, 1,000 of you across the state, because they are, quote, frivolous. The Jake's report recommendations have been given a once-over. And the bottom line there is that nobody did anything wrong because it wasn't their primary intent. At the January 28th State Committee meeting, we also requested, and it was agreed to by Gus, that we would have a special meeting of the Democratic State Committee just to discuss all of this. We are still waiting, and it is exactly 2 months after that meeting. So that is my report on the furtherance of the Neil Morse primary race and the report that came out of it. And thank you all so much again for having me.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for that. And I have to, yes, I just saw Aaron. Let's give a little bit of silent applause. We appreciate that update, and it's detailed, and because we need it to be. Yeah. I also have to apologize because as I was running down our agenda, I went right over Sean Donaghy, who is the hub organizer for Sunrise Boston, just because we're a few minutes behind. So I was going by time rather than person. So Sean, I don't mean to put any burden on you, but we're a couple minutes behind. So if you can give us what you've got and stick to maybe about 5 to 7 minutes, just so we don't fall back. Sean's just anybody needs to know, everybody needs to know, he works to implement and expand sustainable and equitable public transit, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, stop climate change, improve mobility in Boston. What more is there, right? Go ahead, Sean, take it away.
Hi, I'm Sean Donaghy. I'm the hub coordinator for Sunrise Boston here in the Boston area. And I'm here today to speak on mine and Sunrise's experiences trying to organize around a climate debate in the last 2020 election. Reflecting on the story, it happened back in August 2019. And if you could tell by the length of my hair, that was a very, very long time ago in a completely different organizing world. So if you could all join me back in August of 2019, the 2020 election was just kicking off. Some of the presidential candidates had announced, and some of them had signed on to the Green New Deal, which Sunrise was organizing behind. So we thought one of the best ways to highlight this stark difference in climate policy versus no climate policy was a climate debate held by the Democrats during the primary. And to do that, we devised a strategy to pressure Democratic state committees to essentially pass resolutions that their delegates that they send to the National Committee vote in favor of a resolution for a climate debate. So some other states and other Sunrise hubs were taking a more aggressive approach, but we knew it was Massachusetts and we were a little bit different. That most people probably would support a climate debate. So we had worked with a bunch of ORS members who, a few of them were also on the Democratic State Committee, to essentially craft a resolution that was actually a model for other states' resolutions to go before the Massachusetts State Committee. And we planned an action, but a really positive action where we were supporting them and taking this really important step in protecting our futures. So we show up bright and early in East Hampton at the August meeting for the Democratic State Committee. We have like this tunnel as people are going in, cheering them on, asking them to support this bill and resolution that's coming up for a climate debate. Everybody comes in, everybody's thrilled to see the support from a bunch of youth who they've never seen active involved in Massachusetts Democratic State Committee before, really cheer them on for this. And when it came time to the debate, or for the bill, there was a spirited debate, but most people were in very much support. And we were actually allowed into the auditorium, and we kind of took up the back and were very silent. And they passed the bill unanimously. So we walked out of that committee thinking, wow, okay, the resolution process wasn't extremely difficult. I mean, there was some bureaucracy there, but they had an open vote that we saw, and it passed unanimously, and they're all in support of this climate debate. There were even high schoolers grabbing the sign-up form so that they could sign up for the Young Dems in Massachusetts walking out of that meeting. And these were people who had walked into that meeting, probably not the biggest fans of the Democratic Party, having all worked on the Bernie campaign and were burned from that. So to see this kind of like stark difference in the Massachusetts Democratic State Committee was like really hopeful for us. But flash forward a few weeks later at the Democratic National Committee, there's Sunrise West Coast is hosting an action out there, and it comes up for this resolution for a climate debate. And after some spirited debate on the floor, it was actually caught on a process clause. So it was sent to the subcommittee, the procedural subcommittee, which is not an open session. So it went behind closed doors, and it came out 17-8, I think, that we could no longer continue debate on this, and that the resolution didn't meet this procedural demand. And that was essentially killed behind closed doors in this backroom process, despite having an overwhelming grassroots support. I mean, we heard from hubs all across the nation that had similar resolutions passed in their state committee, maybe not unanimously, but still passed. And it was just like this very stark difference where it was, this open, transparent process, or what appeared to be in Massachusetts, with this totally behind the doors closed process at national that was clearly top-down leadership stomping out this resolution. And we found out a couple weeks later, after the transcripts were leaked of the meeting, that it was actually a few of the Democratic state delegates that were sent to the national meeting that actually voted against this procedural measure. So not only that, it was killed by the people who had supposedly unanimously supported this resolution locally. So that was just like a very visceral experience in what transparency can do, or what the apparency of transparency can do. And it's just as important as it is at the State House to have it locally in the Democratic Party, and essentially allow for people to hold their representatives accountable and understand when they aren't actually following through with the things that they're there to be delegates for. So thank you all for having me, and I hope that kind of gives an insight to Sunrise's perspective in trying to work with the Democratic Party.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you for packing so much into a short space of time. Because we have just two more speakers left. One is our final panelist, Reverend Walker, and then Hal is going to give us our call to action. We're about 5 minutes behind, but we have an ambitious agenda. We've packed so much in. So if you can stay for an extra 5 minutes so that everyone gets heard from, we really appreciate that. I'm going to just let you know that Vernon Walker is the Public Policy Director of the Young Democrats of Massachusetts. He was a senior consultant on the Yes on 2 ranked choice voting campaign and is a member of the State Democratic Committee. Reverend Walker, born and raised in Philadelphia, graduate of Penn State, Boston University School of Theology, and while a member of the Pentecostal Tabernacle Baraka Church in Dorchester for 4 years, he helped to develop the church's social action outreach department. So I just don't want to give him short shift. Welcome, Reverend Walker. Take it away.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so kindly for that warm introduction and gracious introductions, and greetings to everyone who is with us. Greetings to my fellow panelists. And certainly we are glad that you are with us on tonight. Certainly, you could have been in any particular Zoom meeting or doing any particular thing at this juncture, but you've decided to be here with us. So we are really so glad about it. And thank you, Arma, for organizing this. I'm very fond of the organization and the approach to organizing across the country. In fact, I was at the founding meeting here in Massachusetts in 2017 in Worcester, I believe, and I'm really fond of the organization and really glad to be invited here. In fact, hippopotamus glad and tiger delighted to be here tonight. And I am one of the hats I wear is being a Democratic State Committee member. I got elected last year, and I had the opportunity to participate in two meetings before the chair's race, and it was quite astounding how many what they call lifetime members that I did not see in those two meetings, although a small sample size. But when it came to the meeting in November, it seemed like folks who have lifetime membership just showed up out of nowhere. And, gave me the impression that there seems to be a lot of people who sit on the seat of do nothing, whistling to the tune of do less. And it's just amazing to me, or just baffling to me, how many people showed up. And we had a chair's race to share the results with you. The current chair, Gus Bickford, received 365 votes. The other two candidates, Mike Lake received, and Bob Massey, Mike respectively received 87 votes, and Bob Massey received 49 votes. And, this was just an opportunity to really challenge the party's vision because we have a platform, but there's an issue with keeping candidates accountable to the promises in the platform. And that is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. We have 2.7 million unenrolled voters here in Massachusetts, which comprise of 57% of all registered voters in the state that are unenrolled. And we need to develop more relationships with these folks. And I think that's what that's what came up for me in the race. And that's what protruded out is that we need to be doing better. We need to be more intentional about coalition building, being more intentional in being part of various coalitions, although the party has been part of the Fight for 15 coalition, the ROAC coalition, and other social justice causes and being at the table. But I think the challenge is, how do we engage the disinfected? How do we engage those who are disenchanted with politics, if you will? Because we in this state have a lot of potential, a lot of untapped potential to reach those 2.7 million voters, but we're not doing a good enough job because we have a lot of people, from what it seems, that is on the Democratic State Committee who are just concerned about oneself and just concerned about me, myself, and I. So the reality is that I think there is a clarion call for my fellow. The previous election served as a clarion call that we have to do better. We must do better. And I was really baffled, sisters and brothers, folks of goodwill. I was completely baffled when folks was praising Baker on the call, Governor Charlie Baker. Well, time will not allow me to go into the atrociousness that we've seen from our governor, but I am going to highlight one thing, and then I'm going to get out your virtual space, if you will. One of the DSC members said that they think that Baker has a good moral compass. Well, that doesn't seem to be reflected in reality. Because when we look at the pandemic and we look at the fumbled vaccination rollout and we looked at who's left behind, I don't know if that moral compass showed up when it needed to show up. particularly when we're talking about Black and brown, frontline communities, communities of low wealth that have been left out of the vaccination process, or the process has been too difficult. It seems that that good moral compass did not show itself. In fact, it's interesting because the state have given hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, into pockets of private companies. Governor Baker told the public that this new and improved vaccine website was in good shape. The next day, the website crashed. So there's an inconsistency. There's a moral inconsistency that we see from our executive leadership in Massachusetts. Well, I'm not going to take too much more of your time, and we certainly can unpack this, and perhaps we could unpack it a whole lot more, and perhaps we could do this again. But the reality of it is, and there's going to be some next steps. The person's coming after me is going to say some next step. But the reality of it is that I appreciate what ARMA is doing, because ARMA is at the grassroots of trying to reach those who are disinfected with politics. Because the reality of it is that it's not a matter of Democrat, Republican, but it's a matter of right versus wrong. It's a matter of goodwill. It's not a matter of, the issue I see is just not politics. Because the reality of it is, the reason we have 2.7 million people who are disenchanted with the political process here in Massachusetts is because we haven't done enough at the state committee. And I believe we have to do more. The time is now. The moment is now that we ought to do more to engage those who are living in communities of low wealth, to engage those Black and brown communities that have been historically marginalized and left out of the process. The time is now. So ARMA, I say, let's keep on organizing. Let's keep on pushing the envelope. Let's keep on supporting candidates that push a platform that will leave none behind. Let's keep on doing what we do, because at the end of the day, change doesn't start in the State House. Change starts from the grassroots on up and gets to the State House. And I'm so glad that we have representatives who are fighting the good fight, such as the representative we have on this call, Representative Erica. I'm so glad that we have elected officials who understand that this is a clarion call to fight for social justice. This is a clarion call to fight for transparency. This is a clarion call to ensure that we have an equitable and just response to this pandemic we find ourselves in. So thank you so much.
Reverend Walker, thank you very much for being a leader on policy, for organizing at the grassroots, and for being a campaign organizer that's getting the work done. So thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to say goodnight and pass it over to Hal, because he's going to take us out with our call to action.
Thank you so much, Amanda, but I actually think it's Henry's turn. Right, Henry?
Yes, let me jump in.
I'm so sorry, Henry. That's two boo-boos from me. Okay, bye-bye, y'all.
Right. So let me just jump in with 3 quick call-outs as how you can follow up tonight's panel with some actions that speak to each of the points that they raise. So first, you can join Act on Mass. Yeah,
Henry, I'm not finding that slide, so you're just going to have to speak it because I don't have it in here.
I just put it all in the chat, Hal.
Awesome. Go for it.
Right. So we had a slide, but it disappeared. We don't know how that happened, but all right. So the 3 things you can do: you can join to bring the issues of transparency to your local rep, and do that through Act on Mass, and the link is there in the chat. You can join your local Democratic or ward committee and help to transform the Democratic Party. You can find out which your local ward or city committee is, and the link is there. And there's also a pledge to get involved in transforming the party, and that link is also there in the chat. And finally, you can join your local Our Revolution affiliate, or if you don't have a local affiliate, join one of the identity caucuses or one of the action committees. That's all there, and I urge you to check out all of them. They all work together in the same direction, and that will not only transform the Democratic Party, make the legislature more transparent and democratic, but make the state work better for all of us. Thank you, and over to you, Hal.
All right, Henry, thanks so much. I'm going to try to see if I can do this slide deck real quick and share it with folks, because I think it will make a difference if I can get that on the screen. So seeming to have a little trouble. Let's see if we can do this. So folks, sorry about that, but we do ask you again to become a movement builder. And if you possibly can, rrev.us/MAMEM, rrev.us/MAMEM, and I think there we go with a little bit of a slide deck for you. So that'd be really great. rrev.us/MAMEM. We do ask you to volunteer for Nina. She is, it's really all about her, right? I mean, in the end, we talk so much about building a progressive party, but it's critical that we elect progressives. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, if we don't elect people who are going to vote for progressive policies, who are going to vote for Medicare for all, who are going to vote to reform the system, then we're not going to get reform. We're not going to have a progressive party. We're not going to have pro-worker legislation. So if you get a chance, please do join our phone banks. Volunteer for Nina, call for Nina, rrev.us/call for Nina. And we've got a call tomorrow night. That's our regular organizing meeting. Ourrevolution.com is where you can find that, or just on Mobilize. And that brings us to the end of the call. Thank you all so much. We'll do our chant real quick. When we organize, we win. So I'll say when we organize, you say we win. When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we win.
Last time, folks, when we organize,
we win.
Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.